Be stronger. Let it go a little more. Anyway, shall we begin? Chapter 8. Liu Shaoqi exposed. We're getting down to it. We're getting to it, eh? Alright. By taking an active part all over the country in the kind of struggle that went on in Xinjiang, Tsinghua students learned to recognize and hate the bourgeois reactionary line. In the outlying provinces, the suppression of the left was often cruder and harsher than it was in the capital, and hence easier to understand. Since it also lasted much longer, there tends to be a marked lag between the capital and the hinterland in every political movement. Beijing students were able to contrast the flourishing, often chaotic, but always exhilarating mass movement where they came from with the stagnant, repressive atmosphere of their destination. Since wherever they arrived, they immediately called for rebellion, they also had a chance to live through, for a second or even a third time, the experience of being labeled counter-revolutionary, of being denied the right to speak, to organize, and to advocate, and consequently also the experience of standing firm, finding mass support, and fighting back. From all this, said Zhu, we realized that the essential thing was to hold power. Without political power, the people can do nothing. With power, they can carry through the revolution. Seeing capitalist rulers in power in so many places and watching them carry out the bourgeois reactionary line, we became enraged. We learned to hate Liu Shaoqi. Students like Zhu also learned a great deal about how state affairs were managed, how the real political framework of a province, a city, or a university should be investigated and, if necessary, exposed, and how a struggle for power should be conducted. What they did not learn was how to prepare themselves for holding power. The deference with which they were treated as Beijing militants, the response for their ever more radical slogans elicited from the masses, and the ease with which they moved onto takeover committees throughout the country when the movement to seize power began, gave them an exaggerated sense of their own skills and importance. There's a footnote somewhere. There's a footnote here on this phrase here, without power, or with power, the people, that is, can carry through the revolution. And we have a footnote that says, actually, this type of thing led to insoluble factional struggle. According to Mao Zedong, a correct political line is most important. With a correct line, power can be won. With a wrong line, power may well be lost. Okay. So, they began to think that without them, tell themselves, that is, without their particular faction or clique, the revolution could not succeed, for only they were really revolutionary. Only they deserved to hold power. Classic vanguardism. To illustrate the prestige of ultra-left slogans at his time, Premier Zhou Enlai told us about a student who changed his name to Ho Duanchuang, which means Ho kicking around wildly. The premier advised him to drop this provocative pseudonym. Imagine, oh my god. Y'all. Imagine you change your name to something, and like Kamala Harris shows up at your house and tells you, maybe not that one. Maybe tone it down. I think that's roughly equivalent here. The difference is that Zhou Enlai was a significantly better person than Kamala Harris. Oh shit. Okay. Anyway. But in fall of 1966, the question of holding power had not yet come up. The rebel students and the masses, whom they helped galvanize into action, were still fighting for the right to organize and to make themselves heard. In this battle, the mass meeting of October 6th in Tiananmen Square marked a turning point. This was a rally of rebels from all over the nation. They came together to celebrate the revolutionary rebel spirit, to challenge and overthrow the bourgeois reactionary line, and to lay blame where it belonged, no matter how high the persons or person involved might be. They also came to remove, once and for all, the counter-revolutionary labels that had been fastened by various Communist Party committees and work teams. How much the climate of opinion had changed by this time can be seen by the fact that Kwai Da-fu was leader and chief organizer of this meeting. Of course he was. His own group on the campus, the Tsinghua University Jingangshan Regiment, had been formed only 2 weeks earlier. It was made up of hardcore, so-called counter-revolutionaries of the fourth category, people whom the ordinary militants of the Mao Zedong thought Red Guards had not dared unite with organizationally because the Tsinghua work team had made their names stink. Now this group functioned as the nucleus of the nationwide rebel movement. Because they had stuck to their guns, had refused to retreat even 1 inch, and had turned out to be right. Their prestige was very high, and their fame spread far and wide. Alright, we gotta do something dangerous here. The tea is finally ready. I'm gonna burn the shit out of my hand. Okay, we're good. And now I have to burn the shit out of my hand. Ow. Okay, folks. No problem. I had to burn the shit out of my hand in order to get this. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this, okay? Here, I'll make the tea can bigger. Alright, check this out. Check this out. Here we go. Here we fucking go. Okay, that's good. That's actually good. Okay. Fuck, not good. Okay, up. Ow, 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 ow. Okay, it's not bad, never mind. Never mind. I didn't burn myself. It's fine. Okay then. So anyway. And lid back on. Yay. We have tea. Alright. Whether to repudiate the bourgeois reactionary line, whether to reverse the case against the counter-revolutionaries, so-called counter-revolutionaries, whether to expose the sources of the work team's power, these had been the issues throughout August and September. The October 6th meeting marked the climax of this struggle, the victory of the rebel line over the loyalist line. After this meeting, rebel organizations, morale high, went on the offensive everywhere, and loyalist organizations began to retreat. Toward the end of November, a section of the loyalist Tsinghua University Red Guards formed a rebel regiment and broke away from the parent organization. This triggered an increasing number of individual defections and group withdrawals. Die-hard loyalists, fearing complete collapse of their line, shifted tactics. They turned their fire from the student rebels down below to the Cultural Revolution group of the Central Committee up above, accusing it of carrying out an ultra-left line, a line left in form but right in essence, a new bourgeois reactionary line. Oh my god. No, you're the real bourgeois reactionaries. You're the real ultra-leftists. Alright. Footnotes. The Cultural Revolution Group of the Central Committee was a group of communist countries working directly under the leadership of the Central Committee, but not necessarily members themselves. The group was responsible for leading the Cultural Revolution, which in practice meant guiding or trying to guide the many-faceted mass movement which the Cultural Revolution unleashed. The composition of the group changed many times. Particularly prominent were Chun Bora, political bureau member and Mao's secretary in Yan'an days, Jiang Qing, Mao's wife, Zhang Chunxia, a Shanghai Party committee member, now a member of the political bureau, Wang Li, during the Cultural Revolution, acting editor of Red Flag, acting director of the propaganda department of the Central Committee, and acting director of Xinhua News Agency, Guanfang, and Qi Benyu, who, along with Guanfang, was a co-editor of Red Flag during the Cultural Revolution. Wang Li, Guanfang, and Qi Benyu were later deposed as members of the May 16th conspiracy. Deposed is one word to use. That's one word to use. Let me explain. Trying to find the Wikipedia page. Why am I failing to find the correct Wikipedia page for this? Okay, well, anyway, there was murder involved. Anyway, so they're going to finally explain the term ultra-left, which I've probably explained myself multiple times already, but anyway, they're going to explain, anyway, here we go. An ultra-left line is a line or set of policies that attacks friends as enemies and isolates working-class revolutionaries. An adventurous line that tries to do today what can only be accomplished tomorrow. A sectarian line that depends on a few activists to accomplish what only masses of people can do. Such a line is right in essence, right-wing that is, because it leads to defeat for the revolution and compromises it just as surely as does right-wing collaboration and betrayal. Hello. Welcome to the stream, raiders. How are you doing? Thank you for the raid, Silver Spook. That was a really long footnote, y'all. That was a really long footnote. Okay. Y'all, this page is more footnote than it is book. Oh boy. Got little books like this. More footnotes than actual book. Oh boy. Alright. So, this, this little shift from the loyalists was the political basis for the offensive launched by Tao Ju, who had been brought to the Cultural Revolution group from South China only a few weeks earlier. Tao Ju's line was "Suspect all, overthrow all," including the comrades of the Cultural Revolution group of the Central Committee. "Let the masses liberate themselves," shouted the former loyalists. "Kick aside the Cultural Revolution group. We don't need a nursemaid." Unable to maintain themselves on the right, they suddenly launched an attack from the left. It was a plea for anarchy, which, well, not really, but weird usage of the word, but okay, which is successful, would have decapitated the whole rebel movement. Although this usage of the word anarchy is closer to correct than the usual one, at least. Oh boy. But like, the idea that these people are saying these things like genuinely, or like with good intentions is ridiculous. I will say that, like, they definitely aren't. Even if they do sound kind of like anarchists, maybe they're not. They don't actually want that. They want Liu Shaoqi to be in power mainly. Anyway, on the Tsinghua campus, the spokesmen for this line were He Pengfei and Li Jingquan. Hold on, how the fuck do I say? Li Jingquan's son, Li Lifeng. Okay, these young men were carrying out at the grassroots a struggle that was simultaneously going on in the Central Committee, a last-ditch attempt to maintain Liu Shaoqi in power. At this point, Jiang Qing, Mao Zedong's wife, and a member of the Central Cultural Revolution Group, stepped into the fray to combat the kick-aside theory and rally the rebels to continue the revolution. With her help, all the left groups on the Tsinghua campus formed an alliance. Dissolving their old organizational forms and names, they merged into one united Jinggangshan regiment. Simultaneously, the loyalist organizations collapsed. The Rump Tsinghua Red Guards publicly burned the seal of their group and then merged as individuals into the new regiment. All this took place at a grand rally on December 19th, the high point of the rebel movement on campus. With all the politically active students and staff united in one organization, the opposition forces were completely routed. The loyalists were crushed ideologically and organizationally. Power was seized back from them, said Zhu. The spearhead of the whole movement then turned directly on Liu Shaoqi. At a grand rally on December 25th, the President of the Republic was named by name and denounced as a capitalist roader. From that point on, it was clear both in China and abroad that the chief party person in authority taking the capitalist road was Liu Shaoqi, but still his name was not printed in the papers. The events at Tsinghua in the fall of 1966 must be seen against the background of a developing mass movement that was nationwide in scale. It engaged almost the entire university and middle school population in political action, and then spread to the working population in factories and on the land. Mao's meeting with the early Red Guards in Tiananmen Square on August 18th and his poster, Bombard the Headquarters, which became public on August 23rd, sparked a tremendous upheaval. As fast as rebels organized Red Guard groups to challenge the people who held power over them, power holders organized loyal Red Guards in the name of upholding revolution. Often, of course, the loyalists organized first in hopes of preempting the field. As the struggle grew sharper, both sides saw the need for contact. Mass organizations everywhere began to send delegates to other places to link up with those of like mind, and also to send investigators to uncover the past records of administrators with whom they were in conflict, or the past records of movement leaders they hoped to expose. Beijing students went out, as we have seen, to mobilize young rebels against the bourgeois reactionary line, and young rebels and loyalists alike came pouring into Beijing to make contact with the student organizations they most admired, to read the lively posters on Beijing campuses, and to carry back to their home communities the spirit of the Beijing struggle. After Mao met with 1 million or so Red Guards on August 18th, the demand for trips to Beijing increased many-fold, not only to establish contact and study revolution, but to see Chairman Mao himself. Since young people, if only they showed a student card, could ride trains and buses free, over 11 million of them poured into the city during the next 3 months. The resources of the whole community were sorely taxed to house, feed, and care for them. All campuses and schools were temporarily converted into guest houses. Tsinghua alone at one time played host to 40,000 young visitors. The overall political effect of this extraordinary travel was to stimulate rebellion, strengthen the left, and expose the right. But a trip to Beijing alone was not enough to make the issues clear, especially since the Beijing student movement was split at least 3 ways, and since the struggle between the bourgeois reactionary line and the proletarian revolutionary line, as the struggle against the work teams came to be known, had to be fought anew in every locality. When the weather turned cold in the fall, the great student migration slowed down. The Central Cultural Revolution Group called on everyone to return home to make revolution in their own backyards. But inspired by a group of students from Dalian who set out on foot for Beijing in October, many young people undertook similar long marches. Their goals: to establish liaison and visit famous historical spots. Zhu Hongliang walked from Zunyi to Guizhou to Shaoshan in Hunan, following in reverse the route of the Red Army on its long march of 1935. The distance covered was 650 miles. Gao Hongjin, a student in the chemical engineering department at Tsinghua, whose father had long been a pedicab operator in Fuzhou, Fujian, walked with 13 others from Fuzhou to Jinggang Mountain in Jiangxi, a trip of 350 miles. I think I might have some tea from Jinggang Mountain. I'm not kidding. Maybe. Or at least I've had some at some point. His group was particularly interested in talking to old peasants who remembered the Civil War days when the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army, led by Mao Zedong and Jude, had made this region its base. Local authorities, nervous about the final outcome of the student rebellion, were glad to see their most militant young people depart on extended treks through the hinterland, and offered them stipends of as much as 80 fun a day for as long as they might stay on the road. With the militants out wandering, the situation at home would naturally be much more stable. Hold on, how much is 80 fun a day? So barely anything. But what was it back then? What was it back then? Hold on, what year is this? What were we talking about? 1960 what exactly? 7? I don't know. Hold on. I'm just gonna choose 1967, pseudo-randomly. I can't remember what year we're talking about here. I'm trying to find inflation numbers, but I can't find anything that far back for China. Damn. Well, anyway, nowadays this would be worth basically nothing, but I assume maybe it wasn't worth basically nothing back then. Oh, boy. Okay. With the militants out wandering, the situation at home would naturally be much more stable. Of course, if one's own people, or own young people, marched away, other young people were sure to march in, asking embarrassing questions and trying to mobilize those who remained at home for rebellion. The best thing to do was to treat these so-called outside agitators as honored guests, give them good hotel or guest house accommodations and good food, thus co-opting them to one's own side rather than driving them to rebellion with condemnation and suppression. But if the established authorities learned fast, the young people on the move also learned fast, and on the whole they rejected the sugar-coated bullets of the capitalist voters and the diversions of the long marches, in favor of returning home to carry the revolution through to the end. It was because the majority of the Tsinghua student militants had returned to their own campus by mid-December 1966 that it became possible to form the Big Alliance of rebels and launch the public movement for the exposure of the Shachi. Since Tsinghua had been a stronghold of the capitalist voters in the educational field prior to 1966, and since once the Cultural Revolution began, Tsinghua had been chosen by Li Shachi as a concentration point for suppressing the mass movement, it also became a concentration point for the exposure and repudiation of Liu and his line once the mass movement broke free. In practice, this took the form of direct confrontation with Liu's wife, Wang Guangmei. From the moment that Wang Guangmei abandoned the campus in August, the students she had oppressed demanded that she return to face criticism. After the United Regiment was founded in mid-December, this demand was renewed with vigor. Again and again, the students asked the Central Committee and the Central Cultural Revolution Group to send Liu's wife to the campus to face charges. Kwai Dafu even organized mass sit-ins in front of the Central Committee headquarters in Zhongnanhai in the Forbidden City to dramatize this demand. But, so our informants told us, Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai did not consider the time ripe or preparation sufficient, so they did not respond. On January 6, 1967, on the eve of the seizure of power by workers, students, and revolutionary cadres in Shanghai, Kwai and his close comrades took matters into their own hands. They persuaded Liu's younger daughter, Pingping, a student at the Normal College Middle School, to prove her revolutionary ardor by drawing a clear line between herself and her parents. They demanded that she call her mother from one of the city hospitals and say that she had been run over by a car and badly hurt. This call not only brought Wang Guangmei to the hospital, but it brought Liu Shaqi as well. Both were seized by Kwai's group. Y'all. I have a question. Do y'all think they went a little bit too far here? Boy. It is pretty funny though. This is pretty... Maybe the kidnapping thing might be a little bit... I don't know. So anyway... Liu himself was released and allowed to return to his work, but Wang Guangmei was held and brought before a mass meeting at Tsinghua. Vowing to a fait accompli, Zhou Enlai went along with this confrontation on 3 conditions. 1. That reason and violence be used, or not reason and not violence be used. Why can't we use both? 2. That the students not personally humiliate their captive. And 3. That they give her adequate food and lodging, hear her self-criticism, and then send her back to Zhongnanhai immediately. Kwai reported the first 2 points to his followers, but not the last one. The mass meeting was a fiasco. The students had not done their homework. They did not have enough facts about past line and policy to truly expose either. Only a few people spoke up, and when Wang Guangmei answered back in refutation, they became discouraged. Many left the meeting before it was over. Wang Guangmei was very clever. When questions touched on matters which she preferred not to discuss, she claimed that they violated security. In regard to this, I can only tell Mao Zedong or the Central Committee. I cannot reveal state secrets, she said. Thus, she frustrated her questioners, unable to beat her down with facts and arguments. Facts and logic. Kwai finally took her off the stage, but instead of sending her back to the city, he held her incommunicado while his lieutenants grilled and threatened her in private. Y'all, it was all to no avail. This whole affair violated Central Committee directives, violated Mao Zedong's policies, and exposed in one ominous flash what the future might hold in store once students came to power. By April, the movement for the repudiation of Liu Shaqi had matured. A vast amount of information had been gathered from all over the country. Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai apparently felt that the time was now ripe, and so, when the Tsinghua rebels again asked for a confrontation with Wang Guangmei, they agreed. On April... Yeah, sure, whatever, yeah, do it again. On April 7th, an editorial on the bourgeois reactionary line of the Tsinghua work team entitled "Hit Hard at Many in Order to Protect a Handful" was printed in Red Flag, the Communist Party theoretical magazine that circulates nationwide. This article attacked Wang Guangmei by name and detailed her mistakes on the campus. On April 10th, she was turned over to the United Jingangshang Regiment and brought before a huge mass meeting, a meeting of approximately 500,000 people, some of whom came from as far away as Baoding and Tianjin. This time, the preparations had been thorough and the masses had been mobilized. A sound truck had crisscrossed the city announcing the confrontation. Posters had been distributed far and wide, and over 300 organizations, including schools and factories, had been invited. Some of them had sent delegations, others had simply declared a holiday, closed their doors, and sent everyone out to the campus. Buses blocked the roads for miles, and the sea of people overflowed the university grounds and out into the surrounding area, so that the loudspeakers had to be set up beyond the campus gates. Thousands of Tsinghua students and teachers had worked day and night to sum up Liu's record both before and during the Cultural Revolution. All possible material had been brought together, sifted, organized, and then written out. In the center of the campus, the repudiation posters dominated everything. Both sides of the main road were completely lined with them. In addition, all over Beijing, special reed mats had been erected for posting anti-Liu material, and they were hung with statements, cartoons, pictures, and rhymes, giving the whole city a festive air. Behind this huge effort lay the special headquarters to direct the struggle against Wang Guangmei. It had many teams for posters, teams for handling outsiders, teams for physical arrangements, etc. When we saw Wang Guangmei standing there with her head down, listening to us, and we remembered the previous summer when she had pressed us down so hard, we thought we really had stood up, said Zhu. At the meeting, Wang Guangmei was asked to stand on a platform made of 4 chairs. She stood high enough so that tens of thousands could see her. On her head, she wore a ridiculous, wide-brimmed straw hat of the kind worn by English aristocrats at garden parties. Around her neck hung a string of ping-pong balls, painted bright yellow to simulate gold. A tight-fitting formal gown clung to her svelte body. What is the descriptions here? And sharp-pointed, high-heeled shoes adorned her feet. The whole outfit was grotesque, designed to mock the fine clothes she had worn while on a state visit to Indonesia a few years before. This was not a good thing, said Zhu. It was a violation of policy. It was designed to humiliate her personally, and it undermined serious struggle against her ideology. The important thing was not to ridicule her bourgeois appearance, but to expose her wrong line and her methods of work. Behind Wang Guangmei stood 6 leading cadre who had played an adverse role in the history of the university. Peng Zhen, former mayor of Beijing, Lu Dingyi, former head of the propaganda department of the Communist Party, Jiang Nanxiang, former minister of higher education and president of Tsinghua, Bo Yibo, chairman of the State Economic Commission, Yang Tianfeng, former minister of forestry and a vice leader of the Tsinghua work team, and Yu Lin, leader of the work team. All 6 spoke during the meeting, criticizing their own past mistakes and criticizing Wang Guangmei, but before they spoke, several victims of Liu's busy wife spoke out against her. The meeting was opened by 2 Red Guards who had been called counter-revolutionaries of the 4th category. One of them had been so hard-pressed that he had tried to commit suicide on a railroad track. His leg was badly mangled. He was followed by one of the set-aside cadres, and then by a peasant from the Peach Orchard Brigade, where Wang Guangmei had removed honest revolutionaries from office in favor of incompetent sycophants who turned out to be embezzlers and counter-revolutionaries. The masses, aroused by the accusations made by Wang Guangmei's victims, shouted angry slogans, "Down with Liu, Deng, and Tao! Down with cow devils and snake gods! Carry the revolution through to the end!" These shouts from tens of thousands of throats rolled through the campus and the surrounding Haidian district like sea waves. They pounded the slight figure of Wang Guangmei and her straw hat and her ping-pong ball necklace until it seemed she could no longer stand. But then she did, and the meeting went on. Peng Zhen, Lu Dingyi, Yilin. There was even an American speaker, Sidney Rittenberg, who spoke for the rebels of Radio Beijing and brought international greetings and support. The chairman and chief organizer of this huge demonstration was, of course, Kuai Dafu. All the threads of authority led to him as the leader of the Tsinghua University Jinggangshan United Regiment, the most famous and the most prestigious Red Guard detachment in the whole of China. If Kuai's name was not already a household word, this meeting helped make it so. Don't know how much we have to explain. I don't know if it's necessary to explain, but Liu, Deng, and Tao refers to Liu Shaqi, Deng Xiaoping, and Tao Ju. Okay. mildly obvious, but yeah, this maybe Taoju is a little less known than the other two, I think. Anyway, this mass confrontation with Wang Guangmei marked the high point of the repudiation of capitalist rulers in Beijing. The apparent unity and enthusiasm of the participants left everyone with a sense of power, purpose, and accomplishment. But in fact, serious frictions had already arisen inside the Jinggongshan regiment, frictions that were eroding the unity, the purpose, and the accomplishments of the rebel students, even as they consolidated their newly won positions of prestige and power at the university. Chapter 9. Split. Who could have seen this coming? Who could have possibly imagined that some splits might occur? Oh boy. Hold on, where's the flowchart? Where is the flowchart? That is a good question. Where the fuck is the flowchart? Where's the flowchart? I don't know where it's in. Don't know what folder the flowchart is in. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Miscellaneous, perhaps? It's in the miscellaneous folder? No. Maybe it's in the old folder. It's old. It's old, maybe. I don't know. Where's... Yo, I can't even read. I can't even read. I found it. Maybe. I found the folder that I think it might be in. There it is. I found it. It was in the old folder. If it will open... Okay. So what was that about splitting? You split the party. 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 Anyway, this is literally just the USA, by the way. Just US Trotskyists specifically. So anyway, here's all the current US Trotskyist groups. Oh boy. So anyway, we're splitting, of course, as usual. These are not Trotskyists, but these people split too, apparently. It's his tradition. What the rebel left seized in December 1966 was not power to run the university, but only the right to lead the mass movement. When the Tsinghua Red Guards broke up and burned the official seal, the left, united as the Jinggongshan Regiment, won a guarantee that its posters would go up, that its voice would be heard, that the printing presses, speaking halls, and microphones would be available to its spokesmen. This was not administrative power, still less party power, but it was effective power over the mass movement, power to lead the rank and file of the students, the lower cadres, and the staff. The January storm in Shanghai raised the whole national struggle to a new level. They seized state power in Shanghai specifically, that's what happened. Anyway, the question of real administrative power, full control of party and state, came on the agenda at every level and in every institution in the land. And often it was Tsinghua Jinggongshan Regiment rebels who maintained liaison stations in every major city who put this issue forward most actively and made sure it was acted on. Wherever Jinggongshan Regiment people appeared, they were listened to with respect, even with awe, and when revolutionary committees later came to power all over the country, seats were either held by regiment delegates or seats were set aside for them, when and if they should appear. Tsinghua Jinggongshaners helped seize power in Shanghai and co-sponsored the famous Seize Power Proclamation of revolutionary rebels that shook the whole nation on January 6th. When Liu Geping set up his new government in Shanxi province a few weeks later, a Tsinghua Jinggongshaner sat on his committee. Back on the Tsinghua campus, the regiment did not fare so well. While it held de facto power for brief periods, it was never able to set up a legitimate university administration. In January, the Jinggangshaners seized and burned the official seal of the preparatory committee and set up a new administrative committee to run things. But this was only an interim committee. It could not be the final organ of power, because the Beijing Municipal Committee and the Central Committee of the Communist Party would only recognize as legitimate a revolutionary committee based on a 3-in-1 combination, that is, a combination of the representatives of mass organizations, of the armed forces, and of the old revolutionary cadres. The Tsinghua Administrative Committee that crystallized in early 1967 was really only an arm of the Jinggangshan Regiment. Since it represented only one mass organization, it could not possibly be called a 3-in-1 revolutionary committee. Before a viable committee could be set up, it was necessary to await the return of large numbers of students still away on long marches or manning distant liaison centers, the active involvement of good or comparatively good cadres, all of whom had been set aside by the work team, and the selection of some cadres from the armed forces, possibly from the Navy work team that had come to help transform education. By April, these conditions could all be met, but just when the coalition became possible, the Jinggangshan Regiment split. The split came over the older cadres, which of them could be trusted, which could be called revolutionary, which could be drawn into the new ruling committee to help transform Tsinghua into a proletarian rather than a bourgeois university. One group of students held the view that Tsinghua was the rottenest spot in the whole education setup and had been under a bourgeois dictatorship for 17 years. Hence all the old cadres were rotten to the core, hopeless capitalist roaders. To find honest revolutionary cadres, one had to seek out those who had been isolated, oppressed, and attacked in the years prior to 1966. In other words, only those known as rightists and counter-revolutionaries in the past had some reason to rate as revolutionaries today. In coming to this conclusion, these students were reasoning from their own experience during the 50-day White Terror, when those students who had been called revolutionary were really conservative or reactionary, while those who had been called counter-revolutionary were really the revolutionaries. Students who took this position rejected all cadres who had held power before. They reached out a hand to the misfits, the targets of past campaigns. This position was reinforced by a rebellious group of teachers and staff called the Red Teachers Union, which was led by just such a group of former misfits who had brought together a questionable assortment of malcontents for the purpose of completely overthrowing the old Tsinghua. Another group of students considered the wholesale rejection of old cadres to be an ultra-left position, one which violated Mao Zedong's policy of curing the disease to save the patient and uniting all those who could be united to oppose the main enemy. They did not agree that Tsinghua's history since 1949 had been nothing but 17 years of bourgeois dictatorship, nor did they agree that all the targets of previous movements had really been revolutionaries framed under right-wing attacks. Some of those targets, they thought, really were rightists and anti-socialist elements. This group of students was ready to rehabilitate and unite with most of the cadres who had been set aside by the work team. Their position found support in a Central Committee directive of March 1st, 1967, which said in part, "It must be soberly recognized that most of the cadres are good, and that the alien class elements who have wormed their way into the ranks of the cadres are very few in number. To refuse to make a class analysis of the persons of authority, and instead to suspect, negate, exclude, and overthrow them all indiscriminately is an anarchist trend of thought." Anarchists, what do you think about that? Yeah. Okay. Interesting line. That two lines in the Jinggangshan regiment emerged on the question of cadres was no accident. Those lines could be traced back to the original positions of many of the participants. It was Kuai Dafu and his hardcore Jinggangshan rebels, the former counter-revolutionaries of the fourth category, who rejected most, if not all, of the old cadres, and it was, in the main, former loyalists of the old 8-9s, later the Tsinghua Red Guards, who wanted to rehabilitate most, if not all, of the old cadres. The former 8-8s, the Mao Zedong Thought Red Guards, split on this issue, some going along with Kuai and the extremists, some joining the 8-9s in their support of the majority of the cadres. These differences over old cadres might not have been enough by themselves to split the regiment if its members had been firmly united in other ways, but in fact the original Jinggangshan militants had never accepted the old 8-9s as revolutionaries. They considered them opportunists who jumped on the anti-Liu bandwagon only when to do otherwise made them politically suspect. Whenever differences arose, they called the 8-9s Liu supporters and hardly listened to what they had to say. Furthermore, the Jinggangshan rebels also attacked the former 8-8s, because they had not fought hard enough to reverse the case on Kuai and his fourth category people. Kuai attacked them as waverers, and some of his supporters said they were nothing but little landlords with red strips of cloth hanging around their arms. They're even worse than the 8-9s. This kind of attack drove sympathetic 8-8s away. Some of them stuck with Kuai, but others joined up with former loyalists to oppose him. The struggle escalated on April 14th, when all those who favored a policy of uniting with the majority of the old cadres met to caucus for their position under the slogan, "Thoroughly repudiate the bourgeois reactionary line on cadres." At this meeting, they formulated an independent policy and asked regiment headquarters for time on the campus loudspeakers to publicize their view. But the leaders of the Jinggangshan regiment, dominated by its chairman Kuai, told them, "You are not only part of the regiment. You can't air you are only part of the regiment. You can't air minority views over the loudspeaker. You can't express an independent position." This, understandably, angered the caucus group and drove them into one coherent faction. What am I doing? Tea is in the teapot today, not in the Yangdabe. This angered the caucus group and drove them into one coherent faction. When Kuai and his supporters tried on April 30th to set up a revolutionary committee, which contained only cadres they trusted, the whole issue came to a head. The opposition left the regiment and set up a separate organization, which they called the Tsinghua Jinggangshan April 14th Regiment. How many groups are we going to get by the end of this? It came to be known, for short, as the Fours. Kuai's group retained its original name, Tsinghua University Jinggangshan Regiment, and became simply known as the Regiment. "We're the real regiment." To the young militants on both sides who quarreled over this issue, it seemed very real, very basic. "We were involved in serious struggle over the old cadres," said Zhu, who was one of the 8-8s who chose to stick with the regiment. They said setting up a revolutionary committee with only the cadres we liked on it was equivalent to capitalist restoration. But we thought if we can't set up a revolutionary committee this month, when we die, we won't be able to shut our eyes. We thought if we accepted their nominations, the old Tsinghua would be restored for sure, and we wept as we debated among ourselves. "As for us," said Ren Yanshun, a former 8-8 who joined the Fours, Lin Jie, the editor of Red Flag, gave us support. He said, "I think you Fours are acting according to Mao Zedong thought." So we assumed that we had the support of the Central Committee. One of the cadres whom we trusted, Li Kang, whose case had not been settled, at a minimum he committed some serious capitalist road mistakes, said at our meeting that the cadres supported by the regiment were all rotten. They were nothing but leftover landlords, rich peasants, rightists, and bad elements who had hated socialism for 17 years. Just a note, because this comes up a lot, when we speak of rich peasants, we're talking about the ones who owned land and had enough money to hire out other peasants, poorer peasants, to work the land for them. They were essentially very small feudal landlords. They weren't quite the same as the actual landlords, but they were like, you know, they were like small feudal lords. We say peasants, but like, if you think about it, not really. It's just how it's because there's a whole, you know, like hierarchy, basically. You know, there's a whole class breakdown going on here. You have the poor peasants who don't own any land. You have the middle peasants who own their own land, but they can't hire out other workers. And you have the rich peasants who own their own land and can hire out other workers, but not nearly as many as the actual feudal lords. Okay. Anyway, for them to come to power would indeed be a restoration, and indeed the rich peasants did lose some of their land during the revolution, of course, during the land reform, since they owned a lot more land than the average peasant. It was redistributed. They owned more land than they personally needed, like as a family or whatever, you know what I mean? Alright. Let's see here. So, for them to come to power would indeed be a restoration. Then he pointed out certain ones. See, he's the bad one. He's the one who's spreading all the rotten ideas. Thus he mobilized us for a showdown struggle. If Lin Jie and Li Kang urged the Fours on, Qi Ben Yu of the Central Cultural Revolution Group and the cadres in the Red Teachers Union urged the regiment on. Said Qi, "You regiment people are the real revolutionaries. You are the core." I am the core. We got that back again. We're the real vanguard. Cadres of the Red Teachers Union said, "You are the red flag of the whole country. Look how many 8-9s there are on your side, or on the other side rather. If you ever allow them on the stage, the Cultural Revolution will be defeated. On this issue, you must struggle to the end." Once the Jinggangshan regiment split organizationally, the rift grew steadily wider. My tummy is rumbling. I'm hungry. I'm gonna eat pizza after the stream. And I'm gonna make a cooking video today. First ever cooking video. It'll go on YouTube later. I'm gonna make tofu. I'm gonna make crispy tofu with soy honey glaze. It's gonna be spicy and sweet and a little sour too, and soy salty, I guess, soy saucy, and I'll serve it with rice. It'll be nice. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna show y'all how to make. Anyway. So, once they split organizationally, the rift grew steadily wider, even though at the bottom, among the rank and file, there always existed for a desire and for a united movement. The leaders on both sides denounced each other ever more vehemently. The members of each leading group thought that only they were revolutionary, and only they should wield power. Hi Nixie, I'm not sleeping. Hope you're doing okay, hon. Oh, I see you message me. I don't have my Discord up when I'm streaming usually. Oh boy. Or you said goodnight, but now you're not good night anymore. You're still awake. I'm sorry, hon. Oh. We are famous throughout the country as staunch, hardcore, iron rod rebels, shouted the regiment adherents as they cursed the Fours. You're going to bed now, okay? Night, hon, love you too. We are the true proletarian revolutionary rebels of the Tsinghua campus, shouted the Fours as they cursed the regiment. What is that emote? Oh my god, that's really cute. Okay, anyway. Later, when Mao Zedong issued his famous directive that the Cultural Revolution was the continuation of the fight between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party, fair enough, each side quickly denounced the other as the Kuomintang of today. Of course, and each was convinced that its struggle at Tsinghua was a reflection of the life and death struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat that then underway in the Central Committee. In this atmosphere, every small disagreement was soon elevated to an important question of principle and was seen as part of the showdown struggle between revolution and counter-revolution. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Has anyone experienced something like this? Oh, right. Literally anyone who's ever used Twitter. Oh my gosh. They have a very slightly different opinion about this one issue than I do. They're a counter-revolutionary. We have to throw them in jail or something. The revolutionary jail. The people's cops. We have to use the... Yeah, anyway. So, then we finally get to it. The students involved were even receptive to those who said, "Yes, indeed, this is a struggle between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party, and such a struggle cannot be settled by words. It must be settled by arms. It must be settled with guns." I don't have any guns to show on stream, plus I'm not allowed to do that anyway on Twitch, but just pretend that I have one. With guns! Guns don't kill people. I kill people. With guns. Yeah. Among those who spoke like this were a number who were consciously provocateurs. Did I just send y'all back like 15 years or whatever? Did I just make y'all feel really old with that reference? About a year after the split, armed struggle did break out between the regiment and the fours, but in April 1967, no one anticipated such a serious escalation. How old is that fucking song, y'all? How old is that song? Hold on, let me check. Is it like 13 or 14 years old maybe at this point? I feel like it is. Oh god. Hold on. I kill people. How old is this? Come on, YouTube. Search faster. 14 years ago. The video is 14 years old, y'all. Oh my god. I'm so old. I'm so old. I even have a kid. Get off my lawn. God. So anyway. About a year after the split, armed struggle did break out between the regiment and the fours, but in April 1967, no one anticipated such serious escalation. The leaders on each side, anxious to seize and wield power in the name of revolution and Mao Zedong thought, of course, only wanted to expose and defeat the other side politically. Once convinced that the opposition was indeed counter-revolutionary, they threw principle out the window and held that all means were justifiable if it led them to victory. Classic. Your means... The ends do not justify the means, y'all. We don't need to be Machiavelli here. Dear Marxists and other leftists, maybe you don't need to take Machiavelli's playbook for everything. Just a thought. Maybe we don't need to murder random people as part of our revolution. I don't think that's very helpful. Just a thought. But they disagreed with me slightly. They said that Steven Universe wasn't as problematic as I think it is. We have to kill them. Is that how the revolution is going to go, y'all? Are we actually going to squabble over Steven Universe? Is this going to be, if the revolution is led by people on Tumblr, that's how it's going to be? Boy. Each side tried hard to lead the other into making political mistakes, and then to seize on these mistakes. In order to do this, each tried to unite in a very tight fighting team, vigorously denying all its mistakes and weaknesses, while exaggerating and holding up to ridicule and scorn the mistakes and weaknesses of the other side. Each adopted an opportunist attitude toward Mao Zedong thought. If any formulation or directive aided them, they would proclaim it to the skies, but if it was against their interests, they would ignore it. When Mao Zedong criticized all those who thought only they were the center, that no one else could possibly be as revolutionary as they were, both the regiment and the force held up a mirror to the other side, asking, how can you think only you are the center, while failing completely to hold the mirror up to themselves and ask, why do we think that only we are the center? Just gonna if you think you are the center, you fucked up. When Mao Zedong said that it was important to make a class analysis of factionalism, each side grabbed at the idea. The Fours said the regiment had an ultra-left position because their class base was petty bourgeois, while the regiment said the Fours had a right opportunist position because they were not just petty bourgeois, but bourgeois, period. Yeah, they all own their factories and shit. Yeah, totally. From this, it was an easy step for each side to claim, greetings, hello, Espen. I'm doing not badly. Well, kind of badly, but not that badly. Better than I was a few days ago, that's for sure. Okay. From this, it was an easy step for each side to claim and to believe, as we have seen, that the other represented the literal Kuomintang. Okay, so you know how I said that Mao was kind of being fair when he said that the Cultural Revolution was a continuation of the fight between the communists and the Kuomintang? He was, but that rhetoric did not go out. That did not work out well, y'all. He was somewhat correct, but he was also that maybe he didn't need to make that particular comparison in public. That didn't turn out well. Yeah, let's see here. Let's think about this, y'all. Kuomintang murdered millions of people. Yeah, so if you're gonna say that, if you're gonna go up in front of the whole country and say this is a direct continuation of the struggle between the communists and the Kuomintang, people are gonna be like, holy shit, are they trying to murder us? We gotta kill them first. And so they did. Later. Not yet. We haven't gotten to that part of the book yet. Only one person has been murdered so far in the story. Okay. Only one. Anyway. This developing factionalism also made it easy for each side to distort the other's positions, especially with regard to cadres. The Fours were not, of course, in favor of rehabilitating all the old cadres. They were for making distinctions, for repudiating mistakes, for bringing back into the political arena only those who recognized their mistakes and wanted to take the socialist road. At the same time, the regiment was not for rejecting everyone. They too wanted to unite with the best of the old cadres. But since the Fours stressed rehabilitation and the regiment stressed repudiation, the two positions were counterposed and simplified until they seemed to be in direct opposition. What it amounted to in practice was that any cadre proposed by the regiment for inclusion on the Revolutionary Committee was automatically rejected by the Fours, and any cadre proposed by the Fours was automatically rejected by the regiment. The cadres picked by each side were not chosen on the basis of any careful analysis, any thorough investigation into the records, but only because they expressed support for one side or the other. If you support me, I'll back you. If you support the other side, I'll attack you. Thus, each side built cadre support in an unprincipled way, and each side, as was later revealed, brought into its ranks very questionable people, class enemies, former Kuomintang officials, wreckers, and counter-revolutionaries, along with many good and relatively good revolutionary people. I like how they had specific categories of good revolutionary people and relatively good revolutionary people. Can we bring that back? Can we okay, maybe not. Gonna start making a spreadsheet. Sort every Twitter user into counter-revolutionaries and various sorts of revolutionaries. Oh boy. Those national leaders on the Central Cultural Revolution Group who concerned themselves most with student affairs did nothing to overcome this burgeoning factionalism. On the contrary, men like Chi Ban-yu, then a hero of the rebels, encouraged it. He told the fours, "Your position is in accord with Mao Zedong thought. You should persist in it." And by that he means, I agree with your position, you should persist in it. At the same time, he told the regiment, "You are the real revolutionaries, and you should be at the core of the power structure at Tsinghua." Great. He's encouraging both of them. Great. With this kind of encouragement from above, the divisions could only grow deeper and sharper. He's the Qin Benyu here is I am creating problems on purpose. Hey, look at these two people. They're starting to talk. These two groups of people that are all starting to talk about like calling each other's counter-revolutionaries and talking about maybe killing each other. I'm gonna encourage both of them. Great job, Qin Benyu. We developed 3 interlocking mistaken viewpoints, said Zhu. First, we misjudged ourselves. We thought, we are perfect flowers and the others are garbage. Perfect, delicate flowers. How could we possibly be counter-revolutionary? The rest of you are garbage. Pure rubbish. Second, we misjudged the masses who held different views. We cursed them either as loyalists or ultra-leftists. Third, we liked those cadres who agreed with us and disagreed, or disliked those who disagreed. Whoever disagrees with me is bad. Typical. I'd like to say that it seems to me that the political struggle on Twitter is a direct continuation of the Cultural Revolution, which is a direct continuation of the fight between the communists and the Kuomintang. Apparently. The result, each side tried to crush each other, to stink it out politically. We picked what we found useful in Mao Zedong thought, and disregarded what was not so useful. What a change in attitude. When we had been rebels suppressed by the work team, we had studied Chairman Mao with tears in our eyes, and valued every sentence. Hey, you remember that one thing that one thing that Chairman Mao said? Yeah, you remember that little essay he wrote called "Oppose Book Worship"? No, they don't remember. He literally... oh boy. Where was the here, literally I have the exact quote that I want. Mao said, "Look at all the statues of me. There I am, standing out there alone in the cold and the rain." So Zhou Enlai had to go around and get rid of Lin Biao and the Gang of Four's long live Chairman Mao stuff, the loyalty dance, yada yada yada. Poor Zhou was left to sort it out and calm it all down. He told us how Lin Biao had said that one word of Mao's was worth 10,000 words. And that Mao's response to him was, yeah, but you don't even listen to one word, so that's 10,000 words you don't listen to. I love this man. Okay. At least I love his wit. Wow, the captions did not get that one at all. I will be switching captions soon, which is annoying because it means I have to do work, but yeah, this caption service, Web Captioner, is shutting down on literally Halloween, apparently. Sad. Alright. Let's see here. So, but when we came to power in the mass movement, all that changed. We suddenly became very jealous of our power. We only chose things from Chairman Mao that would support our position, and not things which would show it up as false. We were afraid other people would take away our power, but we didn't really consider how to use our power to serve the people. Once the split occurred, the two organizations on the Tsinghua campus conducted parallel activities that were very similar in political content, but they refused to unite in carrying them out. Instead, each sought to be the vanguard in the struggle to carry on the revolution, and each ignored or attacked the activities of the other. What sort of activities did we undertake? Well, at first, there was a mass movement for the repudiation of Liu Shaqi's book on the self-cultivation of communists, said Zhu. This followed the April confrontation with Wang Guangmei. Later, many students went out into the countryside to promote revolution and grasp production. We also had a movement to repudiate the revisionist educational line at Tsinghua. All of these movements could have been carried out together by the rank and file of the two organizations, but power remained in the hands of the leaders, and they never allowed any activity to unite the factions. Take our movement to repudiate revisionist education. Each faction held separate meetings. The content of the study might be the same, but we didn't sit together. Both groups marched in parades and rallies, but we didn't march along the same routes or depart and arrive at the same time. Sometimes we even raced to see who could get to the mass meetings in the city first. Many of these things seem like jokes now when we look back on it. There were so many silly things. Whenever a new directive of Mao's came out, we rushed to put up posters celebrating it. If the other side had a very nice poster in a prominent place before we got there, we would paste paper over their signature and write our signature on it. We also raced to see who could read new directives over the loudspeaker first, and thus prove the greatest loyalty. The side that spoke last was either less loyal or not loyal at all. Thus, we labeled each other anti-Maoist. We also sought to serve our factional interests with each new Mao Zedong quote, racking our brains to think how it could be used against the opposition. Even physical defects and small personal quirks became grist for our mill. For instance, Shun Ruhuai, the head of the Fours, had one eye that was fixed in a permanent squint, even though he had good 20/20 vision in both eyes. We called him... I'm not even going to say that. Jesus Christ. Not even saying that. Underlying this intense rivalry, there was, in fact, one level at which the two organizations cooperated. The financial. It all comes down to the money. Divided as they were on political issues, they were still able to get together to sign the vouchers which the state bank demanded before issuing funds. Prior to June 1966, the financial department of the university had handled disbursements approved by the administration. When the work team came, its leading cadres decided such matters. After the work team left, the preparatory committee took over the task, with the result that the rebels were unable to get money for paper, ink, or loudspeakers. When the United Jinggongshan Regiment replaced the preparatory committee as the real power on campus, the regiment leaders won their power to direct financial expenditures. But after the United Regiment split, a split which divided the cadres and staff of the financial department into two hostile camps, the state bank did not dare play favorites. Its cadres demanded papers stamped with the seals of both sides before dispersing funds. Since no one could live or carry on any struggle at all without the money provided by the state bank, the two sides got together each week long enough to arrange for their living allowances and other necessary funds. In everything else, they went their separate ways. The factional split at Tsinghua was by no means unique. Similar cracks in the mass movement appeared at about the same time at all the major universities and in industrial, commercial, and government units as well. The underlying cause for this is difficult to understand, is it? But in general, as the mass movement developed in the course of the two-line struggle in China's socialist society, it tended to split and bog down into an unprincipled struggle for power between factional leaders. Mao Zedong has called this bourgeois factionalism. The unprincipled struggle was definitely linked to latent bourgeois ideology of various contenders for power who started as rebels in legitimate struggle against reactionary oppressors and ended up quarreling over personal prestige and position. In the process, they degenerated from honest revolutionaries into scheming careerists, while conscious reactionaries left over from the old society stepped into the fray, waving false red flags, and sometimes ended up as leaders of the whole movement. This latter phenomenon was summed up by Mao Zedong when he said, "Factionalism shields counter-revolutionaries, and counter-revolutionaries make use of factionalism." Another general characteristic of this process was that the contending forces always reduced themselves to two. At the start, many trends appeared and vied with one another, but sooner or later they joined, merged, or dissolved until only two were left. Third forces, middle forces could not stand. They either disintegrated, their membership going as individuals to opposite sides, or they split and went two ways, or they fell as a block to one side or the other. The most striking parallel to this in the Western world is the American two-party system. I was literally going to say that that's actually exactly like the American two-party system. For once, we can make an actual proper comparison here. For once, it actually makes sense. A lot of people like to make comparisons that don't make sense. But in this case, this is perfect comparison. Yeah, the American two-party system, which could surely be aptly called a system of bourgeois factionalism. Correct. Here, third forces arise over and over again, and unable to stand, are sooner or later absorbed into one side or the other. Yep. That's America. A third characteristic of the mass movement seemed to be that the factions sought outside support and teamed up with like forces elsewhere. Here the matter got complicated. Oh, as if it's not complicated enough already. In practice, the link-ups did not always follow any obvious political logic. In Beijing, the militant rebels of the Geological Institute, led by Wang Dabing, were much closer ideologically to Kuai Dafu's regiment than the New Veida commune, led by Nie Yuanzi, who throughout the work team period was a functioning member of the Veida work team. Yet, in part because Wang Dabing was critical of some aspects of Kuai Dafu's program, he linked up with the Fours on the Tsinghua campus and thereby earned the undying enmity of Kuai and the regiment. They, in retaliation, linked up with Nie Yuanzi's New Beida commune and Han Aijing's Red Flag regiment to form the Heaven or Sky faction, so named because its main center was the Aeronautical Institute. As you can guess, the Geological Institute people ended up being called the Earth faction, and then so they had a fight between heaven and earth. Yeah, literal fighting. They actually shot each other with guns and tanks and artillery. Anyway, just to be clear, we haven't gotten there yet. We will, though. The other famous student rebel was Tan Ho Lan from the Normal College. She linked up with Wang Dabing to help form the Earth faction, so named because the Geological Institute's East is Red commune was its main center. Gradually, all the other factional organizations in the Beijing area linked up with either Heaven or Earth, and bitterly attacked one another, even though they were often closer to individual organizations on the opposite side than they were to many of those on their own side. Temporary alliances on some overriding issue of the moment led to permanent alliances with either Heaven or Earth that completely obscured the original splits that had brought the factions into being. The underlying basic disagreements, Bao and Ge, protect and rebel, which had set the students, cadres, and workers at loggerheads in the first place, got all mixed up as groups crossed lines for temporary advantages. In the end, the only consistent principle was, the friend of my friend is a friend, and the enemy of my friend is an enemy. After a few sharp fights enough bitterness was generated to keep these feuds going indefinitely. At the core of both Heaven and Earth stood good rebels who had fought hard against the work teams in their bourgeois reactionary line. Yet they fought each other endlessly until Mao Zedong intervened in ways that will be described later. Where in all this did the Red Guard 1st, 2nd, and 3rd headquarters, so prominently reported in the Western press, enter in? First, headquarters was set up by loyalists who worked with and defended the work teams in the summer of 1966, that is, by the likes of Liu Tao and He Pengfei. Second, headquarters was set up by groups like the Mao Zedong thought Red Guards, the 88s at Tsinghua, who opposed the teams, but were not willing to go to bat for those denounced as counter-revolutionaries. Third headquarters was set up by Kuai Dafu and others like him, who had taken the brunt of the bourgeois reactionary line in 1966, only to emerge victorious in the fall. The Red Guard Representative Congress that was established in Beijing in February 1967 was conceived as a merger of all three of these headquarters, but actually the majority of its leaders were from the third headquarters, because by that time the other two had lost most of their support. All five of the most famous Red Guard leaders, Kuai Dafu, Tan Holan, Wang Dabin, Han Aijing, and Nie Yuanzi, each the leader of the mass movement at a large university or institute, were top cadres in the Red Guard Representatives Congress. Of these, all but Nie had been early rebels. Yet they fought each other on opposite sides as heaven and earth throughout 1967 and most of 1968, and helped sparked similar factional strife throughout the length and breadth of China. I like how I managed to actually get the captions to recognize the word breadth. Breadth. There we go. Most people pronounce it the same as breath, but I don't. So the captions actually could tell the difference for me. Oh boy. Whew. Things are getting spicy. They were already spicy, but they're getting really spicy. Okay. Chapter 10. Pay attention to state affairs. For Tsinghua students concerned about revolution, the big events of 1967 did not take place on the campus, but out in the streets of Beijing and in the other big cities across the nation, where Beijing students on liaison sparked massive political upheavals that often ended in armed clashes. The most important of the many demonstrations and actions in the capital in which students played a major role were the pull-out Liu sit-ins and the sacking of the British mission. Based on a nationwide scale, the campaign to pull a handful out of the army overshadowed all other actions. So, small background here. The Cultural Revolution had two rules. The first rule was not to attack the army, and the second rule was not to attack the official state radio. Those were the two rules. You weren't allowed to criticize those two things, officially at least. People did criticize them anyway, but I mean, like, the reason why those were the rules was because if you start criticizing the military or the official state propaganda radio, you might end up getting the military attacking you or something, or someone attacking the military, and then starting a whole mess, as we're about to see. So, these three movements overlapped and were interrelated. The pull-out Liu sit-in took place outside the Central Committee offices at Zhongnanhai from July 18th to August 5th. It had hardly gotten underway when the Wuhan incident broke out in the triple cities of Hubei on July 20th. The Wuhan incident served as the trigger for a wide-ranging attack on the commanders of military regions throughout the country, which was still going strong when the assault on the British mission in Beijing occurred on August 22nd. So, the Wuhan incident was a warlord-style revolt of the local military commander, Chen Zaidao, who defied central government directives and emissaries in July 1967. Don't mind me, just gonna become a warlord for a bit. Yeah, anyway, that didn't go well. The two common threads that ran through these three events were defiance of central leadership, as embodied in Premier Zhou Enlai. I like defiance of central leadership, specifically Zhou Enlai. Really? Who appears to have had Mao's backing throughout by large numbers of student radicals, backed up by some mass organization of young workers and cadres, and the collusion of Wang Li, Guang Feng, and Qi Benyu of the Central Cultural Revolution Group in instigating and mobilizing this defiance. I like how they're not actually going after the head of state. They're going against Mao and Zhou Enlai instead. Their goal was to break the power of the leading group around Mao Zedong, especially the power of Zhou Enlai, and to break the unity of the People's Liberation Army. It was a formula for seizing power from Mao Zedong in the guise of protecting the chairman and his line. Most of the people involved, however, were completely unaware of the larger aims. The Pull-Out Liu affair began, apparently innocently enough, on July 10th, when the old August 1st Regiment of the Civil Engineering Institute, a student faction, went to Zhongnanhai to protest the fact that Liu Xiaqi, who had directly suppressed all the students of the institute during the working period, had sent a self-criticism only to the new August 1st Regiment, an opposing faction. The old August 1st members, not the new ones, the old ones, decided to confront Liu in person and went to camp in the street outside Zhongnanhai, where he was living under the protection and simultaneously as a prisoner of the Central Committee. At first, only 4 other organizations joined in, forming a small but raucous knot of people who blocked a side street and shouted, "Pull out Liu!" Premier Zhou Enlai, Vice Premier Li Xiannian, and commander of Mao Zedong's bodyguards, Wang Dongxing, had all made clear again and again that Liu should not be criticized and repudiated face-to-face, but back-to-back, that is, not in person, but in society, through speeches, rallies, articles, broadcasts, and posters. But Guanfeng and Jibanyu, Wang Li was then traveling in the south, saw in this small demonstration a chance to mount a major offensive and so spread the word through a nationally known student leader, Kuai Dafu, that Liu was not sincere, that he would not admit his errors, that he accused the Central Cultural Revolution group of framing him. They urged mass action to put pressure on the former head of state and force him to speak honestly. This call was all that was needed to bring the students of Beijing and their allies among the masses into the streets. At Tsinghua, the regiment and the fours vied with one another to see who could mobilize the largest contingent to repudiate Liu, who could get to the city first, to command the most strategic location near the west gate of Zhongnanhai, and who could set up the most powerful loudspeaker to blast forth its condemnation. We're having a loudspeaker measuring contest, gal. Since the fours were not nearly as well known as the regiment, they tried especially hard to gain fame through this action. They cut through the grounds of the Geological Institute on their way to the city to get ahead of their rivals, and even sent a truck with poles and reed mats to Zhongnanhai to occupy a favorable spot with a permanent pull-out Liu headquarters, which they manned day and night for almost 3 weeks. Big loudspeaker energy. The regiment, confident of its nationwide reputation, joined in the first day's parades and speeches, but camped only one night in the streets before retiring to the more comfortable quarters of the Tsinghua campus. The regiment's lukewarm attitude did not suit Jibanyu. He telephoned Kuai on July 26th and told him, "Pull out Liu is the central task of this period. How can the regiment fall behind?" Thereupon, Kuai hurriedly organized a contingent to return to the city to see the affair through to the end. Indeed, the regiment youth returned to a most remarkable scene, unprecedented in the history of Beijing or any other capital. Hundreds of thousands of people were permanently encamped in the streets around the Central Committee headquarters. Banners and streamers flew overhead, slogans were plastered on every available wall and mat, loudspeakers blared from 100 locations, and cooking fires sent up their smoke and aroma from as many makeshift kitchens. The people, most of them young, had sat through heavy rain, cold dawns, and hot noons. They were browned, dirty, tired, and enthusiastic, each day thinking that this day, at last, Liu Xiaqi would be delivered over to them to be thoroughly repudiated, once and for all. The din created by this huge crowd, and especially by the competing loudspeakers, made it impossible for Central Committee members behind the red walls to sleep. Desperate, the leaders of the nation finally negotiated for silent mornings so that they could catch a few hours of rest. But once the agreed time had elapsed each day, the loudspeakers blared forth with more vigor than ever. The responsible leaders of the Central Committee, including Chairman Mao, had no intention of turning Liu over to the masses, for obviously what might happen to him under the circumstances could hardly be controlled. Instead, they sent emissaries to urge the people to decamp, but Qi Banyu whipped up the crowds again and again by saying that Mao's strategy was not to give in the right away, since that would end the affair, but to hold off until the movement mounted to its highest pitch of numbers and enthusiasm. If you mobilize more people and repudiate Liu more profoundly, in the end you are bound to succeed, said Qi. I like how they're absolutely convinced that Mao is on their side. He's just waiting for the right moment to back us up, y'all. When August 5th, the anniversary of Mao Zedong to bombard the headquarters big character poster came around, the people on the street thought surely this would be the day. The various factions decided to take turns holding meetings in front of the West Gate, but since each wanted to be sure to be there to grab Liu when he came out, those adhering to the Earth faction began to physically assault those belonging to the Heaven faction, hoping to drive them off and to take their place. What began as a unified movement to confront Liu looked as if it might end in a major street brawl with hundreds hurt. At 1 a.m., the West Gate opened, but instead of Liu Shaqi, Vice Premier Xie Fuji, head of Beijing's Revolutionary Committee, emerged. In the name of the Central Committee and Chairman Mao Zedong, he urged everyone to go home. Finally convinced that their demonstration would not be successful, some factions left right away. Others caucused and left the next day. By the evening of August 6th, the Pull Out Liu movement had collapsed completely. What most of the participants never knew was that under cover of this unprecedented demonstration, a small group of ultra-left rebels had been mobilized to seize and hold Zhou Enlai should he come forth. Their theory was that if the demonstration was big enough and lasted long enough, Zhou would have come out to calm things down. Then the militants would seize him. In the ensuing chaos, others on the Central Committee, probably meaning Chen Boda, could make their move towards the seats of power. In the meantime, the Wuhan incident occurred in the south. This gave the militant rebel movement a new cause célèbre around which to rally the nationwide struggle. Chen Zaidao, the commander of the Wuhan military region, had backed a mass organization primarily composed of workers called the Million Heroes, and had used Independent Division 8201 to suppress several left factions of students and workers who were calling for his overthrow. Hundreds had been wounded and dozens killed by the time Xie Fuji and Wang Li arrived in the name of the Central Cultural Revolution Group to try to settle the affair. When these two told Chen that his support for one side against the other was wrong, and that his use of troops was unconscionable, okay, I guess that's the word, the regional commander, in the tradition of the warlords of old, arrested the representatives of the central government and held them for questioning. They were roughly handled by the troops that took them in, and rumor had it that Wang Li's leg was broken. Zhou Enlai had to fly down to effect the release of his representatives, reluctant to land at the Wuhan airfield when he found out that it was surrounded by tanks and large numbers of the Million Heroes, and concerned that he himself might be kidnapped. Zhou landed at a field that was held by loyal Air Force contingents. He proceeded overland to negotiations, which eventually brought about the release of Xie and Wang and the surrender of Chen, who returned to Beijing for criticism and presumably punishment. That pockmarked Chen, an army commander notorious for his suppression of the left, would dare to defy the Central Cultural Revolution Group, confirmed the worst fears. The worst fears of the student rebels, such as Kuai Dafu, who had long believed after discussions with Wang Li, Guanfeng, and Qi Banyu that the country was in imminent danger from a right-wing coup d'etat spearheaded by reactionary army commanders. As early as April 1967, Wang Li had made an analysis of the overall situation, in which he claimed that once Liu Shaqi and Deng Xiaoping had been overthrown, other Lius and Dengs with guns, party people in authority taking the capitalist road in the army, would try to take their place. Mao Zedong and the proletarian headquarters at the center were threatened by a multi-layered encirclement. Wang Li averred the first layer was the conservative peasant organizations in the countryside. The second layer was a right-wing trend backed by the army in Shanxi. The third layer was the capitalist road commanders holding power in various military regions. And the fourth layer was the ring forged by the reactionaries in Taiwan, their imperialist backers in Japan and the United States, and the social imperialist power on the northern borders. They mean the USSR. Without increased vigilance and an energetic mobilization of the masses, Mao's line was in danger of defeat, and the Cultural Revolution could end up in a counter-revolutionary triumph. As a first step in avoiding these possibilities, Wang Li advised the well-known rebel factions to set up a network of correspondents to concentrate on gathering information on the doings of the military throughout the country. Acting quickly, Kuai Da-fu set up with Regiment Command a military information group which reported directly to him and sent out personnel to such important military regions as Beijing, Nanjing, Chengdu, Shenyang, Wuhan, Guangzhou, and Fuzhou. These correspondents went out under the auspices of the regiment and carried with them letters of introduction not only from their own commander Kuai, but from Wang Li, Guanfang, and Qi Wenyu of the Central Cultural Revolution Group, and from Wang Chengwu, the acting chief of staff of the People's Liberation Army, or from Xia Hua of the General Political Department of the People's Liberation Army. Long sentence. The credentials helped these brash students gain entrance into regional military headquarters and to gather vital intelligence about the armed forces all over the country. Summaries of their findings were sent to Kuai, who correlated the material on a big military map in his Jinghua headquarters. To ensure systematic coverage, Kuai developed an outline for military investigation, which was printed up in 200 copies. This outline called for investigating the important leaders of each military region and sub-region, including commanders of security forces and fighting troops, their appearance, history, political statements, and activities during the Cultural Revolution. It also called for learning how each regional command was organized, how its troops were transferred and deployed, what military installations it controlled, and what bridges, airports, rail lines, and highways served it. Complete lists of the names of army cadres were sought and successfully copied for at least 4 of the main military regions: Guangzhou, Nanjing, Shenyang, and Fuzhou. Figures on the total number of military personnel in the army, navy, and air force were also compiled. Kuai's master map was soon crowded with military data, much of it hitherto secret. The Military Information Group and its intelligence effort was thus established as a serious effort on the part of revolutionary students to prepare for any lethal challenge to the revolution on the part of sworn enemies of Mao Zedong. In order to defend Mao, they had to seek out and correlate secret military information, so be it. If, in order to defend Mao, they had to take up guns clandestinely and prepare for battle in the hills, so be it. They were prepared to make any sacrifice, including that of their lives, for Mao Zedong and the socialist revolution. It is unlikely that at this time any of the young militants seriously considered the possibility that their actions might later be used in a provocation against the PLA. At a time when the PLA had become the main pillar of Chairman Mao's strategy for ending factional fighting. As they saw it, they were rallying to defend Mao Zedong in the midst of a very dangerous crisis. Chen Zaidao's mutinous behavior seemed to lend substance to this whole thesis. If Chen Zaidao in Wuhan could defy Mao's proletarian headquarters, were there not Li Zaidaos and Zhang Zaidaos elsewhere prepared to do the same? Wang Li told them that there were, and at the huge reception organized to welcome him home from Wuhan on July 26th, he spoke privately to Kuai Da-fu about it. "Have you been badly hurt?" asked Kuai, who had heard about a broken leg. "No, but my toe is broken," answered Wang Li. "Is it true that some PLA commanders do not listen to Chairman Mao?" "Yes," said Wang Li. "Is this the time to confront this question?" "Yes," said Wang Li. The central task of this coming period is to pull out of the army a small handful of capitalist rulers who have usurped. They have usurped. There we go. Military power. And who are the most dangerous of these? Asked Kuai. Wang Li named Shu Xiu of the Nanjing military region. Sorry, Shiyo. Shiyo. So yeah, there we go. Shiyo. Shu Xiu of the Nanjing military region. I'll get it right eventually. Han Xianchu of the Fuzhou military region, and Chen Xilian of Shanyang as people who must be overthrown. Oh boy.